Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Thursday to you. We're on a rainy day out here across Acadiana, and it looks like those rains are going to be continuing across the region over the next couple of days, and we've got a flood watch in place. National Hurricane Center also kind of watching this particular area for the possibility of some development, although the development chances are fairly slight. But we've looked at a few weather models over the past couple of weeks, which have looked quite interesting. And some of the other models are kind of looking at that as well. So we're going to go over that somewhat here in just a few minutes. First of all, we do have some rain falling here in Lafayette and widespread rains elsewhere across Acadiana. Some are heavy at times. Temperature right now at 78 degrees. Our dew point at 76, humidity 93%, and those winds are currently out of the east-northeast at around 5 miles per hour. Again, looking at the traffic cams, we've got a ton of rain that is out there this time around, and the rains are going to continue to move across the region. And if you have to be doing some traveling out there, things are going to be a bit rough. At least a slow go there with the light to moderate rains that are coming down across the region. Check it out. We do have the SKU-T model here, and this is the sounding that we're looking at from earlier this morning. And yesterday we were talking about those precipitable waters levels getting up to the 2.5-inch range, and the Lake Charles one here this morning has made it up to 2.53, and the one over in New Orleans is also quite high as well. It's running there at just about 2.51 is what it looks, or 2.42 rather is what it's dropped off to. But when that dew point line and that temperature line are right next to each other like that, you do have a very saturated air mass, and that's what we're dealing with today. And with copious amounts of moisture and instability that's out there too, we are going to be seeing a decent amount of rain, and that's why the flood watch has been posted. So we're going to look at a couple of things here. First, the national satellite picture, and there's a number of different things that are happening here. We've got an old frontal boundary that's just kind of stalled out over Acadiana, a surface low pressure area that's off the upper Texas coast, and there's also a mid-level spin that's there too. And then farther down the road, we got a cold front back here to the northwest. That is going to be moving in and pushing southward toward the Gulf Coast, and that's going to actually bring us a pretty nice weekend. So we are expecting something very, very nice as we go into the early part of the weekend. And the Gulf of Mexico satellite showing the rains that are continuing to spill inland, and you can see that the rains pretty much are kind of pulling in from the central part of the Gulf of Mexico. You've got that low pressure area there and the frontal boundary in place. So with those copious amounts of rain, that flood watch is going to remain in place, and it's also going to be bringing some fairly rough seas out there. Boating not really recommended because of all the thunderstorms out there, but a lot of our friends are working on the rigs out there, and it is going to be a rainy one there too, with some pretty big thunderstorms and with some gusty winds at times, maybe exceeding 35 or 40 knots. You could see some really rough seas, maybe pushing up to 5 to 6 feet, but as a general rule, 2 to 4 is what we're expecting in our offshore waters. So as we look at our radar right now, you can see we've got widespread rains. We have a flood warning that's in place now for the areas over to around Baton Rouge. So that's going to be in effect, at least the flash flood warning is going to be in effect for another 30 minutes or so. And that flood warning is going to be causing some problems on roadways over in our capital city. So far, rains have kind of tapered off a little bit here in the western parts of Acadiana, but you can see that there are more rains out here in the offshore waters that are going to be sliding in and putting this into motion. You can see that is kind of surging its way northward. So coastal parishes, Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, and St. Mary, you'll start to get back into the rains, and if it holds on, it should make its way up to the I-10 corridor here a little bit later on. I wanted to show you the expected rainfall too, and part of the reason why that flood watch is in effect. Yesterday, I think we picked up just a little over an inch of rain, at least at the Lafayette Regional Airport. I saw some other backyard rain gauges that picked up 2 to 2.5 here in Lafayette. And then our southern sections picking up somewhere in the 3 to 4 inch range. Now, on top of that, between right now and going through tomorrow night, these are the additional amounts of rain that could be happening across the region, mainly 2 to 4 for us here across the region, and down to the coast we'll probably see some rain chances that are going to be, or at least the rainfall totals are going to be quite a bit stronger there, at least there across portions of the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So flood watches will remain in effect over that area, and we are going to be seeing those heavier downpours coming on down. So flood watch remains in effect for Acadiana, and that is going to stay in place through tomorrow night. I wanted to show you the North American model, and remember I talked about yesterday that I look at more of the global models for more of a long range, 5 to 10 days going out. The GFS, the Icon, the Euro, as well as the Canadian, those all go out 7, 10, even 16 days. But the NAM, which is more of a high resolution model, only goes out 5 days. So this is good for some short range forecasting. And one of the interesting things is you see that low pressure area kind of sliding southward over the next couple of days. At the same time, we've got a cold front that'll be diving into the area. But notice how that low starts there around Galveston, which is about where we're seeing some surface low pressure, and then it starts to make its way down the coast at the same time that cold front is coming in. So I want you to remember this pattern here as I start to show you some of the other computer models that have been suggesting something very similar over the last several days. And that all has to do with our tropical wave that's currently over the western part of the Caribbean Sea. It's right about in here, and it is going to continue to work its way off toward the west-northwest. National Hurricane Center doesn't have a very good chance of development of this until possibly when it moves into the Bay of Campeche, where it might have a little better chance for some development. So as we look at the global models going out 10 days, GFS shows that low kind of drifting south, and then more of a broad area of low pressure extending over the southern part of the Bay of Campeche, but not really messing with the tropical wave, just really bringing some additional moisture over parts of the Bay of Campeche. And the Euro model has pretty much done the exact same thing, and that is going to continue to slide off toward the south. But again, as far as the amounts of rain and the position of where that's going to be going down to the south, the Euro model really is not going to be seeing a whole lot of development there over parts of the Bay of Campeche. So that's something that we'll continue to see as we go through time. The other models, though, the Canadian, for example, has started to grab that tropical wave and maybe had a little low pressure area there over the Bay of Campeche. But as the Icon, if you've been with me the last couple of days, we talked about the Fujiwara effect. And if you aren't familiar with that, it is in the description below. But two tropical systems can sometimes dance around each other, and one can absorb the other. And the same thing happens with general low pressure areas. So if you get some kind of a closed low to come across the Yucatan Peninsula, and if that low that's along the Texas coast starts to slide to the south, you might have something called the Fujiwara effect, and you might get more of a broad area of low pressure going on down in the Bay of Campeche. And the Icon model has been doing this for a number of days, keeping that low and dropping it to the south, merging it with the tropical wave that's coming in from the Caribbean. And then notice how the Icon model going out 7 days as the front starts to wash out and begins to retreat. The Icon model, which I will say has been trying to develop something in the Gulf of Mexico now for about a week to 10 days or so. But we are going to be seeing the possibility of a broad low pressure area. But with the North American model showing that low kind of shoving its way down to the south, and the Canadian, the Icon, have been kind of discussing this over the last couple of days, even though the GFS and the Euro are a lot more dependable. Can't rule out the possibility, and that's probably why we've been seeing the National Hurricane Center kind of put that blip back on along the upper Texas coast. But 5 days from now, next Tuesday, the GFS not showing anything. The Euro model showing a broad area of low pressure. The Canadian model showing a low, maybe a tropical system reaching the lower part of Texas or northern Mexico. And then some of that moisture in the extended period going out to 10 days kind of pulls that up over Texas. And then the ICON model is also showing and has been showing a tropical system trying to develop over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico in association with the low, as well as that tropical wave moving off toward the west. But farther down, as you saw in that earlier model run, it takes that low pressure area and kind of slides it up toward the northern Gulf Coast. Right now, that's a pretty unlikely scenario, but we can't quite rule that out as we go into the next couple of days. So it is something that we'll continue to watch that as we go into the next several days, but right now the possibility of that happening still is pretty far out, and we have to wait and see what's going to be happening. I will say though, shear in the Gulf of Mexico has increased over the last couple of days, but particularly where that tropical wave currently is right here, it's kind of in a lower range of wind shear, so it might have a little better chance at some development there. Of course, the water temperatures are very, very hot. And the forecast wind shear going into next week, it gets kind of extreme up here along the northern Gulf Coast, where it is a pretty light down in the Bay of Campeche. So would it have a window of opportunity? Possibly. Again, if we get low pressure to develop, there's enough moisture there, the water temperatures are high, and you can get some low wind shear, something can certainly spin up. But I will say if it tries to work its way toward the northern Gulf Coast, all of this wind shear that we're seeing here is going to be sliding over the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. So if it tries to move its way back to the north and runs into some of that strong wind shear, it might not have a chance for development there. So that's something that we're going to be watching. Anything else that's out there? We've got several tropical waves that are now being watched. Kind of a little trough right here, but not a tropical wave. Tropical wave here, another tropical wave back here over toward the Cape Verde Islands. We'll watch those, but at this point it doesn't appear those are going to be any threat to the Acadiana region. And then we've got a cold core low pressure area that's along the front there off the eastern seaboard. You can see that rotation there. But again, it's a cold core system. If it gains some tropical characteristics, there's a possibility we could see some formation there over parts of the Atlantic Ocean. And the National Hurricane Center is watching that area in the Atlantic. It's also put the X back on the map there off the Texas coast. Still a low end chance for a tropical wave to develop when it moves into the Bay of Campeche. And then you've got the two other tropical waves that are in the central and western part of the Atlantic. Both of those also have a low end chance for development, but no threat to the Acadiana region for anything that's out in the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And I also will show you that the Global Tropical Hazards Outlook for next week is still showing a 40% or higher chance there for maybe the Bay of Campeche, and also some of those tropical waves that are out in the middle part of the Atlantic might have a chance too if they move out into the central part of the Atlantic. But week 3, we're looking at maybe the possibility of some extra wind shear that might cause some problems with some of these tropical waves that are out in the Atlantic Ocean. So the third week, even though this is experimental and really it is out in La La Land, we don't usually look going out 21 days and really basing our forecast on that. But this new product that we're using is showing that there's a possibility we could still see some action out in the Atlantic Ocean. It has been a very unusual season though, because basically all of the marks early on were showing that we would have a gangbusters type of season, and so far we've only had 5 named storms and we're about ready to reach the peak of the hurricane season. And really between about the middle part of August and the middle part of October, about 80% of all of our named storms happen. We're now getting into the 5th of September and the peak of the hurricane season is the 10th. So any day we continue to go where we don't have a named storm is great news for everybody who lives around the Atlantic basin. So even though the predictions were quite high for a gangbuster season, and I really hope that a lot of folks did prepare, not writing off the season just yet, because remember, it just takes one storm to really mess things up. And we've seen that in the past. Hurricane Andrew is always the example I like to use as a massive hurricane that caused major damage and loss of life. And it was in a season where we only had 7 named storms. It was one of the quietest seasons on record. So one storm is all it takes. We've already had Beryl that's caused some problems, and then Debbie caused some problems farther to our east. Chris and Alberto, that was down near the Bay of Campeche, was more of a rain event. So with Ernesto, that for the most part stayed out in the Atlantic Ocean, with the exception of some strikes there right around Bermuda. So even with 5 named storms, we've had 3 of them make landfall so far. So it doesn't, all it takes is just one storm to really change your outlook or change your look at what it comes to hurricane season. So hopefully everybody will, as much as possible, be able to stay dry. Do watch out for wet roadways and the possibility of some street flooding again as some of those heavier downpours come up. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and also turn on your notifications for Acadiana Weather Today. That way you know when Let's Talk Tropics hits tomorrow at noon, or if we do any special editions over the weekend, or if any severe weather comes in and we activate the severe weather stream, or when Acadiana Weather Today airs each and every weekday morning right about 7:30. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Stay safe, and I will see you on Friday. Have a great day.